David Smith here with yet one more flipped classroom math lesson. 3 tips before we start. First, you can adjust the playback speed faster or slower to suit your desire. Second, you can pause the video at any point to jot down questions or catch up with your notes. Third, you can turn on the captions so you can read my words on the screen. Today's topic, sketching quadratics from intercepts. So if you know the 2x intercepts or the 1x intercept or the y intercepts, you can usually sketch a quadratic right from there. So let's do that. So here's my quadratic equation. Now it's already factored. Okay, so I'm showing you a quadratic equation that's already factored, and you're going to get some problems that are shown in that way. To find the x-intercepts, you set y equal to 0 and solve for x. So let's do that. Y equals 0 minus x plus 1 and x minus 3. Now as you recall, we set each of these little guys equal to 0 and solve. So if x is negative 1, then this x-intercept is negative 1, 0. Now this one, this is x minus 3 equals 0. That gives us x equals 3. So this intercept is 3, 0. Okay? So remember, at the x-intercept, when it's crossing that x-axis, the y value is 0, which is why we do it this way. Now to find the x-intercept, to find the y-intercept, remember there's only one of those. You set x equal to 0. So y equals negative 0 plus 1 times 0 minus 3. So this is y equals negative 1 times negative 3. So 1 times 3 is 3. I have 2 negatives, so this is also going to be 3. And the solution to this equation is 3, which means my y-intercept is 0, 3. So now I have 3 points, and I can use those points to graph this parabola without having to plot additional points. I know my 2 x-intercepts and my y-intercept. So let's draw our coordinate plane and graph that. I'm going to scale my axes up to 5. So there's a 5, there's a 5, here's a minus 5, here's a minus 5. And let's get these points on there. Negative 1, 0 is probably right about there. 3, 0, right about there. And then 0, 3 is right about there. Okay? And we can help out by just writing a neg 1, a 3, and a 3. That kind of gives us a little bit more information. Okay, now look at those 3 points. Your next job is to draw a parabola that goes through all 3 of those. So you need to decide, your first decision is, does it open upwards or downwards? And for my money, it's pretty hard to draw a parabola that opens up and goes through all 3 of these points. You're going to have to wiggle it too much. So my guess is that this parabola opens down. There's one more clue about that. This negative up here, this is kind of like a negative a value. So that means this parabola is going to open down because that's negative. So indeed, I can sketch my parabola. Now, before I do that, I want to point out one more thing. The vertex is always going to be halfway between 2 x-intercepts if you have them. So I know the vertex doesn't go through 3. It's going to have to keep rising maybe up to about there. So I'm going to draw it like that. Okay? So that's a perfectly good sketch for this quadratic equation based on just finding the intercepts. Okay, some of the exercises aren't going to make you find the intercepts. They're just going to make you create a graph given the intercepts. So I've set one up that looks a lot like those problems. The x-intercepts happen at negative 1 and 2, and the y-intercepts happen at negative 2. Now there's a thing about our book that I care for not so much, and that's that they just talk about intercepts like that, but in truth, an intercept is a coordinate point. So this point is really the point negative 1, 0, and this point is really the point 2, 0. So when you're discussing intercepts, I think it's better and more complete to talk about them in this way, because then you're showing the true coordinate point for that intercept. So pause the video for a sec, see if you can write down this negative 2 y-intercept as a coordinate point. Okay, if you wrote 0, negative 2, you're right. And remember, again, that x-intercepts happen when y is 0. That's when you're crossing the x-axis. It means you're neither up nor down, so the y value is 0, and sure enough, we have zeros for the y. Same thing for the y-intercept. That happens when you cross the y-axis. When you do that, you're neither right nor left, so your x value is 0. So in this case, that's why we have a 0 there. Okay, pause the video now and see if you can use these 3 intercepts, plot them on the graph, and see if you can draw your parabola. Okay, I'm going to scale my axes a little differently this time. I'm just going to go 1, 2, 1, 2, neg 1, neg 2, negative 1, negative 2. So that way my graph is a little bigger, it's not all scrunched down in the middle. Undoubtedly you've probably created some graphs like that. Scaling your axes in a way that captures all the points is really good. Okay, let's graph these. Negative 1, 0, that point is right there. 2, 0, that point is right there. And then 0, negative 2, that point is right there. Okay, so now I have my 3 points I can use to sketch my parabola. Now, pause the video and see if you can figure out whether this parabola opens upward or downward. Okay, if you said upward, you're right, because there's really no way I could draw a downward opening parabola that goes through all 3 of these points. It just doesn't work. Also, remembering that the vertex happens halfway between 2 x-intercepts, that tells me that this point's not the vertex. It's going to keep dropping just a little bit past that before it starts coming back up again. So as I sketch that, I'm going to remember that, come down, and then come up. This limb could be a little bit more parabola-y. There we go. Now that you've watched the video, take a moment to jot down extra notes or jot down some questions for our next class. You can also re-watch portions of the video that you didn't get the first time. If you enjoyed the video, please click like, and if you'd like to help me grow my YouTube channel, please click subscribe.